Everyone saw the title, so I won't beat around the bush. This game is bad. Like, really bad. Do not listen to the GameSpot review or the IGN review or any of the mainstream reviews, honestly, because I've seen scores of 8 and higher referring to this game, which at best are incompetent deception, and at worst might even be paid corporate shilling. Wolfenstein Youngblood, at its core, is a forced co-op experience for $30. You play as either Jess or Soph in league with a French resistance group as you look for your father. And to organize the review, I will break it down into various sections here, but the end result, to be totally upfront, it's terrible. I played as Soph, and I had no interest in playing online with other players, so I was stuck with the AI companion, Jess, and I feel like that's probably indicative of a lot of players. It was terrible, to say the very least. The game is riddled with buddy locks, or however you want to refer to them. A buddy lock is a system by which both characters must simultaneously execute an action in order to open a crate or a door, and that is pretty much the only necessary co-op mechanic in the whole game, which gets reused nearly hundreds of times, often back to back to back, or with such a close proximity on the two buddy actions that there is literally no point in it even existing. There is also a system of co-op bonuses called peps that allow you to do a cheesy emote and gain a powerful bonus for yourself and your partner, but by and large the co-op necessity comes down to waiting uncomfortably for long periods of time as your partner goes over to some specific location and helps you through a door. A lesser discussed element of the co-op is verbal communication. I legitimately had to turn off the voice cues in the system menu just to keep playing the game. Every few seconds, one of the sisters will shout a coarse and painfully unfunny line saying, "Dude," or "I'm gonna go do this or that," and they get reused so tirelessly it can wear down even the most patient of players. When it comes to combat, Jess, or Soph, depending on who you play as, will randomly bug out, standing still and let you bleed out on the ground, thus costing a shared life. And if you let them bleed out, the same thing happens. So because of that, playing solo and not constantly online with a random person in your group to replace the terrible AI, you are forced to babysit a terribly programmed companion that will run out into the middle of everything dangerous, die repeatedly, and must be revived or you fail your mission. And this brings us to the combat. Wolfenstein Youngblood has decided to adopt hybrid RPG mechanics. To some, that may seem like a good idea, to others, a horrible one, but personally, I'm of the mindset that it could have been fine. Could have been fine. The mechanics are awful. Enemies have a health bar and two distinct armor types, but the armor types, however, are burnt by different weapons. And I still do not know for certain which armor type all of the weapons are best suited for, but it doesn't matter because the weapon swapping is horribly clunky. You will need to rapidly change between weapons in order to effectively take down certain enemies, and on console, which is the platform I actually played on, it's less noticeable because many games often have a similar UI flaw on the platform, but for PC it will be nothing short of atrocious. The perk system allows players to pick from different upgrade pathways and gain health or armor or carry heavy weapons, but not many of the upgrades really feel all that meaningful. The exception to this is peps. A good pep can make the difference between winning and losing, but for a game that went so far out of its way to include RPG mechanics that do not even seem to mesh very well with the overall concept, there could have at least been some cooler abilities. The combat scaling is uncomfortable as well. Low-level enemies die immediately with no challenge whatsoever, but high-level enemies outside of your bracket are brutally tough at times, and it just feels like they kill you instantly. The added downside is that even when you get a tough enemy, the AI is so bad it can be immediately cheesed 100 different ways, not to mention the graphical bugs that come from that kind of activity as well. Another problem that kind of ties back into the co-op mechanic is that you cannot pause the game ever. Even in single-player mode with an AI companion, you still cannot pause, and it acts as if it is constantly online in a shared multiplayer world space. Some people may not care about this, and anyone playing primarily with another active player will obviously not be able to pause, but I have to believe that a decent chunk of the game's player base are going to play single player, and not being able to pause ever in single player is a totally unacceptable design oversight that deserves every ounce of criticism that it gets. For boss fights, there is essentially one boss archetype and then a final boss. Over the course of the campaign, multiple times you fight a robot enemy boss while killing two side commanders in the area for keys. And that is the only official boss fight mechanic, or boss room format at all, other than the literal end of the game. There are big enemies in the open world here and there, but in terms of enemy diversity, or content diversity for that matter, the game is severely lacking. A final note about combat, though it can be fun to shred through a horde of low-level enemies, that is satisfying at times. From what I can tell after some off-stream experimentation, higher difficulties do not actually reward any additional XP, so what is the point? Sure, some players just want the challenge, but a common rationale for programming in higher difficulties at all is increased rewards as a motivation. Wolfenstein Youngblood seems like it cannot even be bothered to adhere to basic design principles.
Good. Good, all right. All right, tell me what you're sensing.
This is where I finally have something positive to say. I like the art style. Some of the environments and enemies, they look really cool, but that's as far as it goes. The reason this cannot even be focused on is because the vast majority of the game is backtracking. After even a couple of hours, you will most likely have played most of the map zones, and the entirety of the game that follows simply tasks you to run back and forth through these same zones over and over. Also, there is no comprehensive map guide. Even worse, in compounding the backtracking problem, there are no checkpoints. When you play a mission and get all the way to the end but die because of your terrible AI companion glitching out or because of some other issue, you go all the way back to the very beginning. But here's the kicker. You do not reset your ammunition, and this feeds back into the problem of enemy armor bar types. The world may look cool the first time you play it, but it is not properly populated with items. At times it may seem alright depending on where you are, but there are plenty of encounters where you will simply not have enough resources to take down the enemies, and must search slowly and painfully for more ammo just to progress. If you die with no ammo in your inventory, you go all the way back to the start with nothing, and battling through the entire level again low on resources becomes a test of sanity that no player wants to endure.
What time is it?
I think it's time for Arthur and Kenneth to prostrate this sticky wicket.
Fuck yeah!
Now it's time to talk about Wolfenstein. I've seen a lot of players complain that this game went full woke. As a result, it is terrible and deserves to be ridiculed. I sort of disagree here. The game is terrible because the game is terrible, not necessarily because the character choices or political ties. The biggest problem I have, at least personally, is when a game is modified right before release to include shoehorned political themes or appeasement tactics aimed at the radical media or social justice types. That doesn't appear to be what happened here. For better or for worse, from the ground up, the artistic vision was two frat bro sisters acting like total fucking morons. I can think it's a horrible game, but when the artistic vision appears to be conceptualized as intended, I usually fight to preserve that possibility, so even now when I hate the product, I will stick to that mentality. That being said, it's trash. A stinking, unmitigated garbage fire of cringe, bad writing, and shallow characters. One of the very first scenes, which I failed to record accidentally, and there's no way I'm playing that garbage again for the footage, so I just downloaded the cutscene off of YouTube, but anyways, an early scene is one of the sisters basically having a breakdown as if she can't handle murdering someone. She then murders them, and starts screaming with happiness and glee right before throwing up all over the floor. This is emblematic of the game as a whole. I won't layer in spoilers here, but the entire plot from start to finish is one big WTF storyline of zero attachment, no emotional investment whatsoever, and far too many moments like a bad TV show where you just squirm in your chair uncomfortably and don't want to be playing. The elevator scenes, which are actually praised in a lot of other reviews, funnily enough, might be humorous to some. After all, humor is subjective, and highly so, but I would be willing to bet that most players will just hate them and roll their eyes, which is sadly how you will probably react to most major plot developments in the entire game. This is where the game becomes irredeemable. Wolfenstein Youngblood is a $30 game with hardly any content that has some of the worst microtransactions I have ever seen in my entire life. By worst, I don't mean invasive, yet. I mean actually just the worst items. What little items you can even buy right now, though there is confusion on that, which I will cover in just a second here, what little you can buy is ugly trash, like suit skins or helmets that you cannot even see on your own screen during gameplay. For over $7, you can get a generic brown skin. I'm not kidding. They are the worst cosmetics I have ever seen. And on top of this, for certain platforms, the temporary boosts are being sold for gold bars as well. On the Steam page, gold bars are described as follows. Contains gold bars, an in-game currency used to acquire new power armor and weapon skins, gear, pep signals, and consumables to help you and your friends battle through Nazi-occupied Paris. Right now, at least on Xbox, you cannot buy consumables with anything other than regular silver, but this leads me to believe that they are just waiting until the review cycle has passed to turn on the microtransactions and sell players the ability to overcome the faulty ammo balancing with paid boosts. I firmly believe that is their intention, and with that in mind, I am not going to mince words.
What happens now?
Wolfenstein Youngblood is garbage. It is a cash grab $30 title shat out by Bethesda and Machine Games to maximize microtransaction revenue with the lowest possible investment of effort that they could get away with. The characters are so annoying it is nearly unplayable. The two sisters with their disgusting personality types are like the worst caricature of a college douchebag frat boy you can think of, crammed into a hybrid RPG that makes the gameplay tedious and annoying while forcing you to replay the same areas time and time again. The central premise, co-op, is broken and non-conducive to any single-player-minded buyers, while the story leaves everything to be desired and makes it seem like this is just filler material to set up a sequel. Somehow, mainstream reviewers are giving this game an 80, or in some circumstances even higher. Those writers need to be fired right now. This is a quintessential failure of a game that reeks of laziness and poor design. One point of concession I will make is that it is self-aware enough to be priced at $30 rather than $60, but $30 is even too high. There are weekly and daily quests as if somehow to insinuate that this game will retain weeks worth of interest and content for a player. The microtransactions are shameless already and will likely get worse, so my end rating out of 10 is a 4. If you can get it for $10, sure, but as it stands, I cannot in good conscience recommend Wolfenstein Youngblood to hardly anyone. But that's it. If anything, the value in this game is showing once again that mainstream reviewers have lost all credibility and cannot be treated as anything other than talking puppet heads for major corporations that will say anything to anyone as long as it means they can keep clinging to what tiny shred of relevancy and privilege that they even have left. If you want to support the channel, check out the links down below. Merch, memberships, Patreon, all of which help guarantee that YouTube, with its shifting algorithmic unfairness, have no effect on the channel content. But I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.